All right, what's up? Starting a minute early. It is what it is. This is a real interesting card today, even though it is a holiday card, where we get an afternoon game with IUPUI in Southern Indiana. That's where I'm going to start. I think that when you look at Southern Indiana, it's all about what they have in the lineup. That's going to make the difference. And when you watch this team play, this is a very confident team. This is a team that's done a good job of implementing Trevor Lakes into this starting five, and he's been quite positive when it comes down to it. I think that Southern Indiana being led by Lakes, having the point guard skill of Isaiah Swope and his 3-point shot, and then of course Jelani Simmons, who is your scoring alpha. It's just a tough group to keep out of the lane, keep from getting into transition, and forcing you to really defend or give them a good shot at the rim. So I think that from a front court perspective, looking at a guy like Jacob Polakevich, he's been quite good, at least, I don't know, I'd say the last handful of games. Probably that best game was in against who was it? I think it was Western Illinois, where he almost had a double-double with like 20 points. So there's a lot of unknown skill on this team, and it's something that you really saw the best of in their overtime win against Indiana State. You were able to come out, you were able to get your pace and tempo, and most importantly, you're able to outscore your opponent early on in the game. Being able to do that and get into the free throw line in the 25 to 30 time range is how you do it. I think against IUPUI, this is a team that you can get them to commit a lot of fouls against you. You have to crash the offensive glass. You have to limit your turnovers, and you have to be aggressive on ball handlers. You have a lot of good defenders on this team, and a guy that doesn't get a lot of a lot of freaking know-how for it would be Gary Solomon. But on the downside about Gary Solomon, when he is handling the ball, we have seen some turnover issues. So that's something that I think can be resolved against a quality of opponent like IUPUI. For me, it's a big number, but let's not sugarcoat it. This is an IUPUI team that has not done well as an underdog of this type of line. Yes, they may have covered against Milwaukee, but with familiarity and a conference opponent, I can see how that happened. I don't think that this is the case today. I think that this is blowout city, and even on a neutral court where I don't expect there to be a lot of fans, I think that Southern Indiana continuity comes even more into favor. So when Indiana State has been a favorite, listen, they haven't covered. They lost both games, but I don't think that we're going to see a similar fate today. I'm looking at this IUPUI game, and if it's going to be in Southern Indiana's way, I see it going over. Now, the one time that we've seen them lined in a game at this number, it was against my Bonnies, and they did go over the total by 7 points with some extended second half fouling. I think that this is a reasonable spot also where you can literally don't decide on what you're going to do on the 137 full game, take over 141, take under 133, and see what happens. That's how I like to do some of my additional totals. I look at what the over-under margins are for each team based off the games, and if the sports books are not being accurate with their over-unders, then I'm going to just play the additional totals and not bother playing their minus 110 line, which is what they want you to play. I'm going to play a plus money at plus 140 or plus 150. And even when I go 1-1, I'm still up fucking half a unit or like $50 for $100 better. You have to look at the game logs and see how many times the books miss on these over-unders. I'm just in love with them. So I'm going to keep on playing them. This is one of the games that I think that you can play them for. With IUPUI, I just don't know who's going to score for them on a regular basis. That's just my big issue with them. I think that when you look at Bryce Monroe and what he could have done offensively for this team, it just there isn't anybody that I really trust to do it. I like the Gerard brothers. They definitely know how to score when it comes to the second half, and you need buckets. And Vincent Brady is someone you got to keep an eye on from the 3-point line. And then Jalen Counters, the weak link at the point guard spot. He's got great hair, but the turnovers are crazy. So with Southern Indiana applying just a little bit of pressure every other possession or off a made bucket, I think Jalen Counter is going to turn the ball over 5-6 times, and that will help Southern Indiana cover this number. So for me, I'm playing the additional totals. I'm not playing the 137 line, and I like Southern Indiana to win by 20 points. I was saying it to the guys in my Discord yesterday. I was like, this is one of Southern Indiana's great opportunities to just flex their muscle. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not taking IUPUI. All right. The next game I think that is on the board is going to be that Delaware Rider game. Now, this is an interesting game just from a line movement perspective because we have seen the line go from 144 to 139 back up as high as 142, and we are seeing the line move now in favor of Rider. Now, Delaware has been fantastic. There's no denying that. When you look at that win against Princeton, that's their fourth or fifth winner. No, it's their fourth win in a row because they lost the Cornell game. That's a good freaking team to be able to back on the road like this. I did not expect them to go in and win that game outright. I thought that it would be competitive. I thought that it would be extended game fouling, but I did not expect them to win the game by more than 2 3-point buckets. So I do think that we are getting some really good Delaware action on this game right now. At 2.5, it does seem very attractive to me. I also think that if you're going to be able to win this game outright, you're probably winning at halftime. Obviously, the key for this Delaware team is to utilize and get the best production out of this very upperclassman core. When we talk about Jameer Nelson Jr., when we talk about freaking Jair Davis, it really helps ease the loss of Andrew Carr and Dylan Painter. I think that when you look at what Christian Ray has been able to do when it comes to scoring high percentage shots, getting on the offensive glass, he doesn't look like a guy who's going to give you those type of numbers, but he has been better than advertised. Now, the one guy that I'm always talking about when I talk about Delaware's Ebi Asamoah, this is a guy that has been a very good on-ball defender. He's been able to limit his turnovers when he has the ball, and he can take the ball away in a one-on-one situation and in a help defense situation. Outside of that, my only concern is always going to be for Delaware, what happens on the nights that they're not getting to the free throw line, that they're not getting some of these high percentage rim attacking looks. Well, I hope that the offensive rebounding creates enough second chance opportunities for them to be able to get those extra possessions that they need. I think that when this Delaware team is ball hawking, that's when they're at their best. And the way that Rider's going to run their offense is they're going to give Murray the ball. If Murray can penetrate the paint, then you're in trouble. But if you can keep him on the outside and you can close out on some of those pull-up threes that he'll take in transition, then I really think that even though this Rider team is old, has lots of continuity, they match up well. They don't have a natural big man, so they have undersized big men that they're going to run out at Jair Davis. And if you've watched Jair Davis operate on the low block, you know that he can take guys that are 3-4 inches taller than him on the regular. So I think that this is another situation where Delaware can win the game outright, and I'm not going to be surprised to see that happen. When it comes to Rider, I think that Rider hasn't really played in, I don't even know. I think it's like 2 weeks that they haven't played. So maybe there's a little bit of rust. Maybe that first half takes them a little more to adjust. So I definitely see that there's wire-to-wire value and first half full game value betting with Delaware, especially with them being on a 4-game winning streak. Now, Rider beats Stonehill, and Stonehill is definitely one of the more interesting teams to bet on that are new to D1. But I'm not going to take too much into that game. I think that if they were able to stop Dwight Murray inside, they would have had an easier time. But, when you have to deal with some of the strength and size that they have in the guard spot with Mervyn James and Alan Powell and Alan Bertrand, it's no walk in the park. I don't expect this to be an easy game or easy on the heart, but I do expect Delaware to go and win this game. So I think that this is another money line situation spot with Delaware. And if you're brave enough, Delaware is going to probably take care of you. I think that when you look at Ryder, my big problem with Ryder is how many times can they get to the free throw line? Because they are aces there. But if you can't get there, well, that's a bigger problem. So definitely one of the more interesting games, but Lawrenceville, New Jersey is going to be popping tonight. And we got two hot teams going up against each other. I like the Dogs, so we'll move on from there. All right. Which one should I talk about next? Got a lot of 7 o'clock games. Oh, yes. We'll get this out of the way. I'm on St. Bonaventure tonight. I took them yesterday when the line came out. I'm on the under 133. I think that when you look at the Bonnies on the road, yes, they have not been able to cover on the road yet based off a closing number, but on the opening number, they are 1-1. I think that with this game, this is a program rivalry. The Ed Coughlin Cup is up for grabs in this game. The Bonnies have done a great job over the past couple years of being able to win this game, but this is a new Bonnie team. This is not as dominant of a Bonnie team, and I do have some concerns. Watching Chad Venning operate on the low block has been one of the biggest surprises for me, but my big issue is going to be, what's the status of Barry Evans? Is he going to be able to play? Is he going to see some freaking regular minutes? Can Kyrell Luke defend some of these bigger guards, because he just seems way smaller than what he's listed on his scorecard? Can he stay out of foul trouble and be able to use some of that bullet speed to get to the rim and score those unorthodox freaking layups? It's a team that I think has a lot of potential if everything's going right, but it just hasn't been the last couple games. Both these teams are on 3-game losing streaks, so there is that. The Bonnies have lost 3 out of their last 4. They did beat Cleveland State. I think that this is just a good get-right game, and I think that going into Siena, I think that this is one of the games that they can actually take care of. Now, from a defensive standpoint, obviously Chad Venning versus Jackson Stormo is going to be big. How Chad Venning can defend Stormo without fouling. Stormo's not a freaking hops kind of forward. He's going to try and score with good footwork, using his body to create space, and that's how Venning has to avoid getting into foul trouble, because as we've seen, Coach Schmidt is not confident in putting Anquan Hill there and playing Max Amundsen a ton of minutes. So Venning's got to be on the floor. We are at our best with him there. And I just think that with Javion McCullum, that's the big wild card. I think that Bonnies are good rotating defense on the perimeter, so they can close out on Andrew Platik's 3-point corner shots. But McCollum is the wild card. If he has a bad shooting game, then the Bonnies aren't going to have trouble. But if he's on point, then it's definitely a little more dangerous. Now, this is a guy that we saw against Ole Miss. We saw against, I think, I can't remember if it was it was against Stanford. Yeah, he is definitely cold-blooded, and if you can stop him from hitting threes early in the game, you're going to take away a lot of his I guess, allure. Because when he doesn't score in double digits, this Siena team doesn't win. We saw what Delaware did to them. They took away the 3. They obviously fouled them a little too much, but they didn't let them get on the offensive glass and control that. Another thing, you can really bring help defense on McCullum, and you can force him into turnovers. He'll toss the ball away, or whatever other kind of unforced turnover you can make out there. So that's something else for the Bonnies to hopefully take advantage of tonight. Outside of that, you need Daryl Banks being able to lead this offense. We know that he's been able to do a little better job avoiding some of those double teams and corners. But for him coming off a freaking inside screen and going up for that 15-foot jump shot, that's his bread and butter. Otherwise, you want to get him into three-point shooting situations with his feet set. I think that this is a winnable game. So I like the fact that I beat the line. I don't like the fact that the Bonnies are still a favorite when they opened up as a 1-point dog. But I'm on the Bonnies and I'm on the under in the game there. All right, let's stop talking about my Bonnies because I can talk about them for a long time. And we'll move on to Hofstra in South Florida. Now, listen, South Florida at the beginning of the year, they had that little stretch where they were a beautiful fade. Well, those days are over. They're not as easy to decipher as they were early on in the season. And that's really because of what they're getting out of some key recruits that they brought in from the transfer portal. Now, obviously, this team has not figured out how to make free throws. One of the worst free throw shooting teams in the nation. So in a tight game, you definitely have to worry about that. And their opponents have taken advantage of the fact that they're going to the free throw line a lot against them, and their opponents so far this year have been able to hit them. Now, Tyler Harris is definitely the key cog, but I think that Selton Miguel and his three-point shooting has been critical for this team. Now, if they get James Boggs back tonight also, that's another boost to this team because then they can bring in guys like Keyshawn Bryant, Corey Walker, Trey Moss, and then Boggs off the bench to go along with what they're already getting. They have a decent big man in Russell Teshua, and the biggest question mark in this game is going to be, what is the status of Aaron Estrada? He's a game time decision. That leads me to believe that he will play tonight. And that makes me think that South Florida is going to have to score more than they're used to win this game. Sort of like the Northern Iowa game where they scored 72 points. Now, going up against this Hofstra team without Aaron Estrada and going up against with Aaron Estrada is apples and oranges. You just can't really put them on the same plate together and be comfortable with that, because when you look at what happens when he's not on the court, Tyler Thomas is taking a lot of shots. Now, he's a good three-point shooter, but he's not the guy that you want in the second half at the free throw line. I think that when you look at some of their lesser-known guys like Juan Carlos, he's done a good job so far taking over, playing some big minutes, solid at the free throw line, but that's pretty much all he's good for. Good on-ball defense, taking care of the basketball, and being able to drive and get to the free throw line when you need it. Amari Marshall, this is another guy I think that can be a big standout player. We've seen glimpses of it already against Middle Tennessee and Purdue. This would be a nice opportunity for him to get going against a South Florida team that he's going to be able to have an athletic and quickness advantage versus most of the guys that are going to be put on him. It just seems like if you have Estrada, it makes this a Hofstra spot. The CAA is no slouch, and this is one of their other very good teams within the conference. Speedy Claxton is a good coach. He's turned this team from less zone to more man-to-man, and that's helped them in many areas. But right now, from a betting perspective, if you think that Estrada isn't playing, you hit it right now. If you think he's playing, you hit it right now, because when he gets ruled in, that number is going to go in Hofstra's favor. It's inevitable. So we'll see what happens. But I think that if Hofstra has Estrada, they can win. If they don't, this is going to be one of those tight South Florida games that they probably don't even cover 2 points. They probably win by 1. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a good game, though, regardless, because if Estrada isn't in, it'll be easy to cheer for South Florida. And if Estrada's in, you're looking for one of those mid-majors to beat what I would still call a Power 6 in South Florida from the American. All right, let's talk about Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Texas A&M Commerce. This is a spot where I hate to say it, but I think that Texas A&M Commerce could be a very useful team tonight. I think 9.5 points is a good number for them. I think that going into Purdue Fort Wayne, we have not seen them be able to cover numbers like this. Even when we expected them to cover against Detroit, that game went to overtime. They were trailing most of the game. This is just not what I'm used to seeing from this Purdue Fort Wayne team with all the experience, continuity, and skill that they have. Damian Chongqui having trouble getting his shot off. Jared Godfrey having trouble deciding if he needs to freaking pull up for a jumper or go to the rim. I think that with Bobby Plantis and Robbie Capiti, these are guys that can get to the free throw line, do work on the glass, but when Purdue Fort Wayne is being aggressive on ball, when they're being aggressive on the ball, that's when you see them getting out, scoring those easy buckets, and that's what they need. That's what they're missing. So against Texas A&M Commerce, while they don't have the name brand style, they do have CJ Roberts, and CJ Roberts is a competent, quality college basketball player that has been able to make a difference at stops at Lamar, New Mexico State, and so far this year he's done well. I think that him being in the lineup is definitely key. Seeing this team lose like they did against Abilene Christian was hard to watch, but it does bode well for an over tonight. We aren't getting the best of the line. There's no way to debate that one. We've seen this line go from 139 up as high as 144. I still think that we're in a range that we can still get over. When you look at the last three games, all three games that closed went over by 4.5 points or more. The Wyoming game went over by 35.5 points. So the odds makers really don't know what the fuck they're doing on this game. I think that Texas A&M Commerce has to be able to prove that they can score bucket for bucket for 40 minutes with Purdue Fort Wayne. And when I look at some of their defensive numbers, that's where I have a little more confidence. They're not a good free throw shooting team. They're not a good shooting team in general, but they do a solid job of keeping a team at 30% from the 3-point line and not allowing teams to just score at the rim at will. I think that going into this building where Purdue Fort Wayne hasn't given us a reason to really trust them to cover the number, it does make sense to me to back them. Purdue Fort Wayne is no gem at the free throw line. They're not going to freaking dominate on the offensive glass versus Commerce. And if they aren't trying to take the ball away actively from Commerce can be able to run their offense and be able to keep this game close. So if you're really into a gamble tonight, Texas A&M Commerce as a first half money line dog could be one of the spots. We've seen Oakland do it. I wouldn't put it past this Commerce team. All right, hold on. Let me just take a drink here. All right. We'll talk about Maine and Akron next. Now, listen, Akron has not been a good double-digit favorite. I can't get behind them. I just can't do it. Regardless of if it's Maine or not. I've lost money betting Akron as a favorite at this type of number at home, and I'm not going to do it. I think that they can win the game. I think that it's going to be a little more difficult. I think that when you look at this Maine team, what they have at the point guard spot is what differentiates them. I think that this is a solid 3-point shooting team when they can get those threes. They're quality from the free throw line, and when you have what you're getting from Jaden Clayton and Nova Scotia's own Kellen Tynes, that's big. Not only are both these guys solid moving the ball, playing together on the floor, they're also taking the ball away from their opponents. They're bringing that help defense. They're getting into the passing lanes, and they're using their hands inside to take the ball away from big men. Now, obviously, Jetty needs to fucking do some scoring. We need his 3-point shooting. But Jashante Wright-McClash has done a fantastic job from the 3-point line, hitting those foul line jumpers. I think that this is a Maine team that understands we're not going to beat you running up and down, but we're going to slice and dice. We're going to slash into spots, and we're going to be able to get the looks that we want. I've watched a lot of this Maine team against high majors, against low majors, and I think that in this game today, obviously Enrique Freeman is the biggest concern, how their big men take care of that, but they got 3 or 4 guys that they can rotate in and out, and they're not going to get plagued by foul trouble. With Peter Flipovity, with his ability to freaking get inside and use his shoulder to get good hook shots and get to the free throw line, that's something that can be really useful, because what is Freeman's backup? I don't really know. So I just think that when I saw this number, it was too big. I think that this is a first half full game spot for Maine. I think that Maine's team total is something that I'm interested in also, even though these teams have combined for for I guess 12 out of 16 games have stayed under. I still think that this is a little too low. Every time I see these numbers in the 120s, I always have problems getting on the unders. I'm not going to look too much into what Akron and Wright State did last time out. I'm just going to think about what Maine's offense is going to do, how they score their buckets. And frankly, the 3-point defense is probably the biggest area of concern for Akron defensively. They can score the basketball. I do not see them having trouble scoring 70 points in this game. But outside of Enrique Freeman, if he gets into foul trouble, he gets injured, this is a very beatable team. So I'm going to ride with Maine. I would have had the number under double digits. I still think that there's value at 12.5. I still think that there's value at the first half +7. And I'm really trying to convince myself to take that first half over 60 or 59.5 if I buy the half point. And with first half overs, I don't care what anyone says, buying half points when I've had to have made a difference. So we'll see what happens. I think that we're going to see a little higher scoring first half, and I do think that Maine is going to be competitive all the way through. So hopefully they don't break my heart, because they've been one of the teams that I've really enjoyed betting on. And with their style versus Akron's guards of Tribble, Trenton Hankerson, Xavier Castaneda, I do think that it's a winnable matchup for them. All right, let's move on to another game. Okay, yes, Holy Cross versus New Hampshire. Now, this is a game that I want to take New Hampshire. I do like what they've done. Listen, they lost a ton in the offseason, but they have reloaded quite well. They're a very good free throw shooting team. They're a very solid 3-point shooting team. And when you watch Clarence O'Daniels do his thing and have a big game, it's very, very good. I like it. I like it. I like it. Now, I think that the X factor for New Hampshire when they're playing at their best is when Nassim Derry comes off the bench and gives them some of that 3-point shooting that they need, because this is a team that is not going to be able to beat you running up and down the floor. They're going to beat you offensively in the half court more often than not. I think for New Hampshire, one of my biggest concerns just is taking care of the basketball and avoiding some of these unnecessary turnovers. When I watched them against St. Joe's, when I watched them against freaking Boston College, I've seen some good. I prefer them in a game like this more so than in a game versus the likes of like Georgetown or Boston College, even though they beat Boston College outright. Holy Cross is definitely more to handle for them down low than anything, because what are you going to do with guys like Nick Johnson? You need Nick Johnson to be able to stay on the floor, to be able to do a good job giving you some solid defensive minutes versus Jarrell Gates. I think that that's my biggest concern. This is a guy that obviously understands how to play America East basketball. He's been here for a while. He's upperclassman. You need him to be able to produce today. I think that outside of that, I don't really have a lot of concerns. Anybody that's going to have the ball in their hands when the game matters um, is going to be able to knock down free throws. There's a really solid 3-point shooter that can come off the bench, and you have one in the starting lineup, and you have multiple guys that can freaking supply that complementary scoring. So 5.5 points seems reasonable. Just with Holy Cross, you just don't know how they're going to run their offense, what their shot attempts are going to look like. And when you watch some of their previous games, especially their most recent game against Northeastern, coughing it up like that, how does that carry over, or does it carry over? So for me, if you can stop Terrell Gates from scoring and dominating inside, keeping him off the glass and forcing him into some turnovers, then I just don't think that there's another game changer on this roster to really take over. Maybe Joseph Octave would be one, but with how in and out guys have been in the lineup for this team, you really just don't know who's going to be there on a daily basis. Like last game, I can't remember who they were missing. Koulibaly wasn't playing. I think that he was the only one. So one thing for Holy Cross that concerns me about taking New Hampshire is what you get out of the older guards off the bench in Octave and Jade to see. The Houston Christian transfer is definitely a guy that can have a big game if he can penetrate the paint and he can get open threes. But this is just not a Holy Cross team that I see having enough consistency. So coming off such a bad game, not being able to hit 70% of your free throws just doesn't do it for me. So I'll ride with New Hampshire. Excuse me. I'll ride with New Hampshire at home and take what I would call a pretty square play. All right, let's move on to, Western Illinois, North Dakota State. I don't really have anything on, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I will talk about Liberty and Grambling State. Now, Liberty is obviously one of my sort of biased teams. But I think that this is just one of those games that you really have to be concerned about what Grambling's going to do defensively, what kind of defensive effort they're going to be able to bring in this game. Now, Grambling usually is a very good three-point defense, but going up against this three-point offense and Darius McGee's pull-up three-point shooting is definitely not really matching what the stats say. I think that when you look at the Grambling team, their free throw shooting obviously is a big concern, especially at a number like this, because if this spread is close, there's going to be fouling at the end of the game. And if Grambling can't get lucky with Liberty missing some shots at the free throw line, I just don't see them being able to backdoor cover it. I'm not saying that this is going to be a walk in the park. I do think Grambling is competitive for 20 minutes, but it's hard to deny that Liberty probably is going to play at their best when they're at home, coming off a dominant defensive performance. And let's also not forget, when Liberty's at home, they've been able to really score some points. So for them to eclipse 40 points in the first half would not surprise me whatsoever. I think that when you look at how Liberty takes care of the basketball, that's one thing that is going to cause Grambling some concern, because Grambling is a team that wants to ball hawk you, and you just can't force Liberty into a lot of these dumb turnovers. They got a lot of upperclassmen, big kids that really know how to use their body to protect the basketball on the inside. I think from a defensive standpoint, you got to worry about Liberty also taking the ball away from you. They're no schlup on the defensive end. We've seen them be able to bring play full court press, be able to trap in the half court, be able to bring help defense on guys on the low block and cause turnovers that way. So this is just, I think a bad matchup in a building that Liberty has smoked a lot of teams. I expect a freaking 20-point win. I'm going to be on Liberty. I'm going to be on Liberty on the additional point spread also, because when you say 11 and a half, it makes me want to take 14 and a half. So I'm going to gamble. I'm going to take Liberty full game, and then I'm also going to take them on the additional point spread. So I'm pretty confident in the full game. I would not be surprised to see Grambling keep it close for 20 minutes though. So the one concern about first half I'll say is Grambling on the road has not done well in first halves. They average only 23 points in the first half, 33 in the second. So there definitely is a major uppage in scoring, but this could be one of those games that number doesn't play out to be correct. So if you can keep Bryant to 62 points, it makes me confident to back you the next game. All right. Let's go. The COVID is gone. I am not COVID anymore. It's just the bong hits beating up my lungs. And yes, there has been, and there will be more, because that's all that I have to spend my money on. So, all right, let's move on to the next game. Grambling Liberty is a potential route spot. Marist and Manhattan. Now, this is Patrick Gardner Day. If you don't know who Patrick Gardner is, he is the transfer portal impact big man that Marist got. He's been fantastic. A guy that can hit a bunch of threes, dominate inside, just an upperclassman that knows how to play collegiate basketball. I'm a big fan of him personally. I think he's just a really solid player, and it shows by the 17 points and 8 rebounds that he's averaging. This is a kid that, if he is able to get going early, gives Marist that extra boost that they need to win a game like this. And when you talk about a guy that you wish you could get a scoring prop on, this would be the guy. Last 6 games, he's had double digits in all. The only time that he had under 15 points was against Columbia in the 52-39 win. So he still accounted for almost 20% of the team's points. He's a great mid-major, low-major player. I like him. He's the key tonight. If Marist gets him going, then this may be a rock fight, but it's going to be a rock fight that Manhattan loses by 10 points. Josh McRoberts versus Patrick Gardner is going to be interesting on the defensive end for Gardner to stay out of foul trouble. And then when you look at the fact that Roberts loves to crash the offensive glass for those freaking slams, or for those offensive rebounds that turn into put back dunks. That's what you got to be able to take away. So being able to get low and really box him the fuck out is what you got to do if you're Patrick Gardner tonight, because this is a tough assignment defensively and offensively for you. Some of your finesse shots may not work against this type of big man. So I think that when you look at Marist, they definitely have the pieces in my eyes to be able to fuck with their eyes open. But that's going to mean that Cooley, Cooper, Cam Ferris, Noah Harris, these guys all got to produce. They're all between 7-10 points per game type players. The perfect complementary outside shooting that you need from when you have a dominant big man. Now, I think that the biggest guy that I worry about playing is going to be Cooper, because I don't think that he played in the game last time out. And he's probably their best shooter. He's probably their best 3-point shooter. So that puts a lot more pressure on Cam Ferris and Noah Harris. And Cam Ferris, seems like he's been relegated to the bench role. So, this is still a spot where I think that we've seen Manhattan play some good basketball. I just don't think that we're going to see that extend to this game tonight. Now, Manhattan's been a very good over team. I just don't like it at this number. Now, if this was a line that was at 135, 136, I think that I could get behind an under a little more. But the last time that I saw the odds makers line this game at a number like this, the game stayed under and it didn't even get to 110 points. So I'm not rushing to the window to bet or rushing to my computer screen to bet this full game over. I think that, like I've seen with a lot of Manhattan games, when the total is 134 to 136, that's when we've been able to get on some very easy overs. Outside of that, I do think that Marist is definitely susceptible to one of those lulls in the first half. But with the number moving in Manhattan's favor, already a point and a half from 5.5 to 4, I'm just gonna patiently wait for Maris to become a 3.5 point favorite, and then I'm gonna jump on it then. But I do think that Maris at home versus this style and tempo that Manhattan's gonna play with their poor free throw shooting and really being very dependent on a guy like Ant Nelson or Samir Stewart to have a big game, it just doesn't do it for me. Now, I will compliment Logan Paget and Nick Brennan. I think that both are quality, but Marquez Watson's the guy that could be the X factor for Manhattan if they're going to win this game. Now, it's not my favorite line to bet, and I wouldn't tell anybody to not take Manhattan to win this game, but for me, I see the allure of it, but I also see how it can go wrong. And I'm not going to throw what Fairfield was not able to do and say that Maris can't do that. So for me, I'm going to wait for the full game. If you like Manhattan, I would just take them first half now. And with the total, I like the under in the game. And if the line goes up to 132, 133, then I'll just take the additional total at 131 or 130 and a half. All right, let's move on from that Marist Red Fox game, and we'll talk about St. Joe's and Sacred Heart. Now, this is a spot where I'm gambling on this one. I took Sacred Heart first half money line plus 246. That's one of my plays. I think that while Sacred Heart has looked very bad the last 4 games, this could be an opportunity. This is a worthwhile gamble for me. St. Joe's is coming off a game that they could have won against Villanova at home. Maybe they walk in a little freaking sleepy to start this freaking game and then have to make a second half comeback, which is something that they have not been that they've definitely been exposed to. I think when I look at the total, though, I think that's a little more of an easy spot to me. I think that taking the first half under and then taking the full game under would be the way that I play it. St. Joe's doesn't want to get into an up and down game with you because they're not going to beat you and dominate you on the glass. Every game that they lost, they get beat on the glass. And this is a Sacred Heart team that crashes the glass from what I've seen and watched them play. I think that not having Christian Winborn is not a nail in the coffin. I think that if Lynn Greer got injured, it'd be a little worse. But you are missing some of your depth, and you're missing guys in the front court and in the back court now. So never a good situation to be dealing with injuries. Sacred Heart is not going to leave a lot of points at the free throw line, ideally. The last couple of games, they have left a bunch of points there, so I'm hoping that this is something that they can improve. But St. Joe's, outside of some games at home, they haven't been that good of a first half team to me. So I'm willing to take them as I'm willing to take Sacred Heart as an underdog, possibly able to pull something off today. Now, when you look at St. Joe's, obviously you got to get some good inside driving lanes. You got to set a bunch of screens. Can't rely on the 3-point shot. And even though they are a good 3-point shooting team, they just have the skill and quality to really force the issue at the rim, force the refs to blow the whistle. And the way that they win and cover games is by getting to the free throw line a ton. At home, we've seen them do that very well. It seems like they're following the game plan a lot better. And if Sacred Heart is able to match that and do a good job of keeping them off as much as possible, I just think that this is one of those games that you can get a team little sleepwalkish. So St. Joe's, one of the big things that I have a problem with them is that uh, they just they find themselves turning the ball over at the worst times. You saw it against Villanova. I think that we see it again tonight, and I'm willing to ride with Sacred Heart, knowing that this is an experienced team. This is a team that's getting healthy. And when you have a guy like Nico Gillette, when you have Joey Riley, when you have Aiden Carpenter, Rasheem Solomon, this is one of those games that mid-major players can stand out for. So Sacred Heart is at their best when they're playing up and down. I can see that being used at times in this game, but this is just not one of the spots that I think St. Joe's is going to come out freaking guns blazing. Now, if you let Eric Reynolds get out for fucking a 25-plus point game, then you're in big trouble, but I just don't see it. So I'm going to take a shot with the dog. I'm going to take Sacred Heart first half money line. And then if St. Joe's is up by 3 or 4 points at the half or even more, I'd be still looking at Sacred Heart second half. So I'm not buying what St. Joe's is putting out there today. Could be dead wrong, but I think that it's one of the worthy gambling spots on this card. All right, let's talk about Charleston, Coastal Carolina. Now, we've seen this line go from 5.5 to 9. Now we're seeing it as low as 7.5 right now. I think that this is a Coastal Carolina team that is getting better, but the problem is last time out against South Dakota, I was all like gung-ho under the impression that this was going to be a game that we see freaking Antonio Day play a bunch of minutes. Now, that did not happen. Antonio Day played 18 minutes. He went 0 for 4, 2 for 4 from the free throw line. That's not something that is going to help them in this game against Charleston tonight. They need Antonio Day playing like Antonio Day of last year, of the year before. Not to mention 4 fouls in 18 minutes. So not what I expected coming out the gate, even though Coastal Carolina won the game by 1 point. We'll need a better fucking performance out of him tonight. But when you look at Coastal Carolina's makeup and the way that Charleston is playing from a tempo-wise, they're not playing like Winthrop anymore. They're playing slow. They're playing under basketball. And if Coastal Carolina gets rooted into that shit, it's not good. One of the things that Coastal Carolina has to utilize is dominating on the offensive glass and getting to the free throw line where a lot of the guys are freaking can't miss types. I think that this is a very talented backcourt when you get the regular Antonio Day to go with Linton Brown from St. Bonaventure and Jamaro Brown from Eastern Kentucky. Throw them with Mustafa, who's a very solid, dominant big man on the glass, on the low block, and at the free throw line. It just seems like Coastal Carolina as a home dog is the way to go in this game. The numbers moving against Charleston right now, and watching Charleston play Stetson last time out, that makes 6 games that have gone under, and we're talking about games that have been lined in the similar point range to what we're seeing right now. 151 is the line right now. The last, 5 games have been 146, 144, 150, 149.5, 160.5. What do they all have in common? They went under by 14 points or more in all 5 of those games I just listed off. That screams to me under basketball. So fuck the 151.5. I want 147.5. I want 144.5 at plus fucking money. If this trend is going to continue and the books are not lining Charleston games correctly, whether they be on the road or at home, why wouldn't I gamble a little tonight? So I'm rolling with the home dog. I like what they have against versus. I like what they have versus Charleston's core of guys like Rob Larson, Rain Smith, Delono Bolon. Um, just it seems like a Wofford team that can beat you when it comes down to it, but is going to beat you with defense before they beat you with offense, because there's no denying it. Charleston has changed their tempo, and I'm just not going to be sucked into some more overs with these guys. So we'll see what happens. I think that this is a Coastal Carolina spot. I think that this is an additional total under spot, and I'm not going to use Charleston in any money line parlays. I'll tell you that. So this could be another win for Coastal. Cliff Ellis has got a good makeup for this team, and we'll see if they can extend that tonight. So an 11-1 team coming in, but that doesn't mean that they're going to cover the points on the spread. All right, let's move on from that game. And let's talk about Stonehill and Bradley. Now, I'm on Stonehill full game. I'm hoping to get a better number first half. I see 9. I see 9.5. Maybe I can suck it in for a little more. Listen, Stonehill's a team that I feel like I've just made so much. I'm already up enough with them that I can just keep on riding them, even in situations where I'm not really 100% confident. I think that Bradley is one of the teams I've had problems with, similar to Wichita State. Rink Mast is back. He's been very good for this team over the past couple years. And with guys like McKavy Leons and freaking Connor Hickman, it's definitely an interesting Bradley team. Now, I think that with Connor Hickman, this is the guy that I'm more interested in. He's a very good ball facilitator. We saw the best of it against Missouri State, where he had almost a triple-double. I think that if you get good ball handling out of him, a couple three-point makes, and then a couple trips to the free throw line, you can really bypass some of the turnovers that he's been putting up. I think that when he's at his best and when Bradley is at their best for the point spread, it's obviously games at home, games versus freaking opponents that they have some experience against. And I just don't know if this is one of those games. I think that against Stonehill, they have the element of surprise versus Bradley. And if they change their pace and tempo throughout the game, they can really freaking put it on them. Now, we saw them cover against Boston College. We've seen them cover against a bunch of double-digit line games, Fordham, UMass, Army. I can't remember if there's any other ones. But they're another team that they haven't been able to figure out the totals on. So when I look at Stonehill, while in theory they should be able to play a little more up tempo, this could be a really ugly under basketball game. Bradley does not play a lot of overs. They don't play a lot of overs in this point range, that's for sure. 134.5 is an under to me. It's an additional under, and it could be a heavy additional under. But from a point spread perspective, I've seen them beat up on teams at home. Merrimack definitely comes back to memory. But I saw them also struggle against Southeast Missouri State. And Southeast Missouri State, to me, resembles more of what you're going to get against Stonehill in the second half of extending the game, trying to go to the rim as fast as you can without freaking utilizing the shot clock. Just something about the style. I don't know how else to say it. I just don't like the number. It could be walking into an absolute trap, and Bradley wins this game by 30 points. I just won't do it. So I like unders more in the game. I think that the first half under 63, the full game under 134.5, and then additional unders is the way that I'd play it. I'm on Stonehill full game. I'm looking to get on Stonehill first half at 10 or more. But it's a real big clash of styles, and whoever's able to inflict their style and tempo on the other is going to benefit their backers. So we'll move on from there. Billy Teravainen, that's another guy that I worry about for Bradley. Very good spot up 3-point shooter. All right, Alabama State and Arkansas State's a real interesting game also. Now, Alabama State is definitely one of these teams that have done okay against some really superior competition. You know, when we're talking about Arkansas State versus the competition that they played, Duquesne, Pittsburgh, San Jose State, you know, they played UAB, USC, Pepperdine. You know, they haven't played a lot of freaking cupcakes. So their win-loss record, I usually throw that out the window on a game like this, and then I look for an opponent that I have more power ranked in the same area. So obviously, the game that they played against Eastern Illinois is the game that I go to. I think that Alabama State is able to actually be competitive in this game. The fact that the number's gone up from 9.5 to 11 makes me like Alabama State that much more. Now, I'll bypass what happened against Georgia Tech. It was a really bad start for them. I do think that going up against this Arkansas State defense will be a little bit easier, and it'll be a little bit easier to defend because we know about Arkansas State. We know what Arkansas State does well. And if they don't get a good game from Caleb Fields, you know, they're in big trouble. Anthony Phelps is a 3-point shooter that you have to keep off the 3-point line. Omar El-Shaki is a guy that you got to keep off the free throw line, who's going to go and do the dirty work, get those offensive rebounds to get to the free throw line. But outside of that, you know, there just isn't a lot. I think that the one guy that I'm interested to see if he can build off his last game is Isaiah Nelson. If he's able to build off that 13-9, then maybe freaking there's enough support there for Fields to run this game. But if they don't get to the free throw line, they're in trouble. Like, this is what they need to do. They need to get into the bonus as quickly as possible. They got to be able to keep Arkansas State off the free throw line, and they got to force Arkansas State into some more turnovers. You know, if they're gonna barely touch them, barely bring any pressure, that's not going to work for Alabama State over the course of 40 minutes. Arkansas State is in a good fade spot to me, just because of their win against Southeast Missouri State. I think that they come back down to earth, even though they're at home. So I'm not looking to get on Arkansas State as 11-point favorite. I would be looking at Alabama State. And when I look at Alabama State and I look at their totals, I'm like, wow, the odds makers have not been able to figure them out. When we're talking about every game that I can see that they've played, the odds makers, the closest that they've been was 6 points in their game against Pepperdine on an over-under that was 159 at closing. I think that this is another game where you have additional total value. We're talking about Alabama State that in games lined in this point range of like 130 to 135. We've only seen one of them, and it was an under 133.5 that went under by 8.5 points. So I do think that we could see 125, 126 tonight. So I'll let that number go up as high as it's going to, and then I'll take an under, because one thing that I've learned about this Arkansas State team is that they play very slow tempo first halves a lot of the time, and we've seen games lined at this exact number that stayed under by 33 points against Mississippi Valley State. So it's definitely possible. It seems like a good plus money gambling option, and I'm going to ride it. I think that the first half under 60.5 is going to be on my Google sheet tonight. And if that number gets to 130 or 130.5, I'm going to take it there. And I'll take it also at the 129 that it's at right now. So I'm just trying to be patient on some of these totals and seeing if I can squeeze another point or half point out of them. All right, let's move on. So I don't like Arkansas State as a double-digit favorite. That was the general consensus. All right, let's talk about Oral Roberts and South Dakota State. Now, for me, this is an Oral Roberts spot. I like how they're playing at home. I'm gonna take away the nonsense that they did in the second half versus Missouri State and be like, listen, they knew they were winning this game. The game was freaking definitely not contested for about 32 out of the 40 minutes, I would say. There was a time that Missouri State looked like they can make the comeback all the way, but Oral Roberts put them down. With Connor Vanover and his blocking ability, Max Asmith and his scoring, Carlos Jurgens, Keon Thompson and their freaking complimentary shooting, there is tons of options on this Oral Roberts team. And I think going up against South Dakota State, this is not your normal South Dakota State team. We don't have that Baylor Shireman or that Douglas Wilson on this team. I think that there are major issues scoring the basketball. I think that even though this is an experienced team with Alex Arians and Matt Mims and Matt Dellinger, Charlie Easley, I look at Zeke Mayo and William Kyle, the two young guys, as the most important players. And you need to get more out of Zeke Mayo. You need more out of William Kyle. They need to be averaging together 30 to 35 points, not 24. So I'm just not convinced that South Dakota State can win in an up and down game versus Oral Roberts with this version of them. Now, Oral Roberts, from a first half perspective, is definitely one of my favorite spots on the board. 5 or 5.5 is good by me. I think that when you look at their team total, though, that's probably one of my favorites. I think that with Oral Roberts at 39.5 or 40, that's a number that they can get over in a game that's lined in the 158 range. So for me, this is a high scoring game. This is an Oral Roberts dominating game. They got their head out of the sand. And when I see a 39.5 or a 40 on a first half team total for Oral Roberts, that's a winnable bet to me. Now, for Oral Roberts, they put up 45 against Missouri State. I think that they can do that plus some tonight. So I would not be surprised to see them freaking pull a James Madison. This is a good Oral Roberts team. We cannot deny that shit. So when I look at some of their numbers, obviously the thing that stands out to me is A. Smith and his free throw shooting. He doesn't have to score 30, but you can guarantee he's going to be looking for his shot a ton tonight. Isaac McBride, I didn't mention him. Yeah, that's another 3-point assassin. I just like the makeup of this team. I like the toughness that they have. I like the forward strength that they have with guys like Patrick Mwamba. So I'm rolling with Oral Roberts first half. Oral Roberts first half team total. And I'm looking to get on freaking full game over if I can get a lower number. I'd like to get 157, but at 158, I'm just holding stale on it right now. All right, let's move on. I do know that the UConn Marshall game's on right now. I don't know the score. I'm not checking it. Okay, yes. South Dakota versus UMKC. Listen, this is a UMKC spot. It's a winnable spot, win or lose. I think that UMKC is going to be able to start the conference season off with a win. Now, South Dakota, obviously, they're very healthy right now. They're having all their guards playing their best right now. But I think that getting a guy like Damani Hayes going, scoring, rebounding, being productive at the free throw line, that's what South Dakota really needs. You know that Cruz Perro Hunt and AJ Plitzwit and Mason Archibald are going to carry you from a scoring perimeter perspective, but you need more guys being able to produce. And if you have Camarados and Hayes both going in the same game, your probability of winning goes up tenfold. Now, if you're going to play a game that's almost 200 points, then that's probably not going to work out for you. Versus UMKC, that's just not going to happen. I think that with UMKC, it's all about what they can do offensively early. Shamari Allen's coming off a 28-point game. I don't expect him to put up those kind of numbers versus a conference foe, but I expect this UMKC team to play good enough defense to keep this game freaking low scoring and keep this game in their favor, because if they got to go up tempo like they did against Idaho State, they are going to lose. But if they play some low tempo basketball like they did against Lindenwood, then they are going to win. That's as simply as I can put it. I think that at 135.5, if you like South Dakota, you're taking the over. And if you like the under, you're taking UMKC. Now, if this game was lined in the 120s, I would be on the over. But when I see 135 to 139 with UMKC, I go under, and I go under by margin. Let's keep in mind here that UMKC's 3 games lined at that point range, 136, 139, 138.5, all went under by 16.5, 21, and 28 points. To me, if you're going to look at numbers like that, that's actionable information. And although the opponent in South Dakota doesn't seem like they're willing to play that type of style, we did almost see that number hit in the Air Force game. And we've seen that number hit in a lot of games that were lined higher than this. Their game against Mississippi State, their game against LIU, against Central Connecticut State. Oh, no, that was against Coastal Carolina. The first game against Coastal, not the second game. So I think that there's definitely undervalue at this number. Now, it just matters what side you like, because if you like South Dakota, then you probably like the over. But for me, I like UMKC at home, conference opener, and I like the under. So Summit League basketball is predominantly over basketball from what I can remember from the last couple years, but there's always going to be a couple teams that are playing stinkers. And UMKC, they want to play games that are rock fights. They don't want to play marathons. All right, let's move it on down the board. Obviously, we don't have a lot of games left. We've already covered all the games on the added board. We're just going to finish up with some of one of my favorite games, and then one is a fan favorite. Let me just get a quick drink. All right. This is one of my favorite games. Denver and Nebraska Omaha. Now, I know what I just said about home teams in the Summit League. Well, I'm going against that in this game because like every game is its own entity. So in this game, Denver, if they can bypass home court advantage for Omaha, I don't see why this line hasn't moved 3 or 4 points. Why hasn't it moved? Because every time it's moved 3 or 4 points, they didn't cover the number. I think that when you look at Omaha, this is definitely an Omaha team that has some trouble scoring the basketball outside of guys like Frankie Fiddler. Markel Sutton's coming off a 29-point game versus a non-D1 opponent, so put him more around the range of 10 to 15 points if he's going to have a good game. But at the end of the day, even if their personnel has very good games, it doesn't make sense to me to be backing them here. I think that when you look at this Omaha team, listen, I can't remember the last time they played at home. I think that they've won 1 and lost 1 at home. So I can't tell shit from that. But what I can tell is all the shit that I've watched this Denver team play. These Pioneers are some fucking ballers because they do not settle. They go inside. They go to the rim. There's so much freaking rim penetration and talent on this roster. There's 3 or 4 guys that can take over any game. I don't even know if Tevin Smith is going to play today, and I don't even think that they'll miss him if he's not in the lineup. And let's pump the brakes on something first. When Nebraska Omaha has been making people all that money, what were they? They weren't a freaking 1.5-point underdog. They were a 20-point dog. They were a 23-point dog. You know, I think that when you look at this line, this is a win-loss situation. If you think Denver can go in and win this game, then you're on Denver. I think that they can. So I'm on Denver. I feel very confident. I feel like it's a fucking diamond. And even though Denver's lost the last two games against Sacramento State and UCLA, I still think about that game against HCU. I think about that neutral court game against Citadel, against New Orleans building. Those were the type of opponents that I can compare to Omaha, not the UCLA's. So for me, this is a spot where I think we have to see points for Denver. They're a high percentage team. They go to the rim more than any team that I can really think of that I've watched. And I just think that when you can score so many points at the free throw line and so many freaking layups, it helps you because you're not a team that settles for jump shots. So what do you need on the road? You need to see the ball go through the hoop. If Denver can do that early, then they're going to win this game. It's going to be wire to wire. It's not going to be one of these tales of two halves to me. So I like Denver in this spot, as you can obviously tell. I'm on the first half over 68.5. I don't like the fact that the number full game has gone down, 5 points from 150.5 to 155.5. So I don't understand that. It just makes me think that Denver's going to win this game in a rout and Omaha's going to have trouble scoring. Denver's solid from all three levels. They're the second best field goal percentage team in the country because they go for so many layups. I can't make a case for Omaha unless fucking Denver just starts shooting only threes. Tyree Corbett off the bench, Justin Mullins. Maybe they have Smith back. They still have Tommy Bruner, Marco Lukic, Tuco Tamano. These guys are some good fucking college basketball players at their level in their system. So sign me up with Denver. I'll eat fucking crow if they suck a dick. I don't care. So it is what it is. I'm passionate about this shit. I was feeling passionate today about this card. Let's talk about one of our other gems, Chicago State against Illinois State. Now, this number is moving in favor of Illinois State. We've seen it go up 2 points from 5.5 to 7.5. I think with Illinois State, they should win the basketball game on paper. I just do not like them as a 7.5 point favorite. I've done very well with Chicago State as a double-digit favorite. Now we're getting into a little bit of a little more complicated freaking standing. But I think that going back to maybe the UTM game, the Southern Indiana game, one was an outright winner, but both were covers at the similar point range. So the Valparaiso game where they came out and surprised the fuck out of me, I will not be surprised again. I like what this team is doing. I like the continuity that they've built up. My biggest concern or question mark when it comes to this game is what to do on the total. Illinois State, the last 4 games have gone over by 13 or more points in all 4. And that is something I have to take note of. They've been at home for 3 out of 4 games, and they won 3 out of 4 games, scoring 77 points or more. Now, when I see something like that, and then I go and look at Illinois State as a 71.5 team total, I'm like, well, if this game goes over, that Illinois State 71.5 seems like a good number, especially at minus 104 juice. So right there, Illinois State intrigues me with their full game team total based off what we've seen them do. And even in a loss against Ball State, last time out, they scored 69 points. So in their loss against Murray State in overtime, they scored 67. So I think that we are getting a good short number with Illinois State at 71.5. So I like their team total, but at 7.5 on the point spread, I like Chicago State. I'm very impressed with what Brent Davis has done for this team. I'm very impressed with Jashawn Corbett, even though he's coming off a bad game himself. And you know what? As long as this team can stay out of foul trouble, they got a ton of guys that are experienced and know how to play this level of basketball with Elijah Weaver, with Wesley Carnett, So this is not the Chicago State team of last year, The only way that they get blown out is if they can't keep up tempo wise. Everybody fouls out and nobody can hit a layup. So for me, I like the dog here. I like Illinois State to score points. And based off of Illinois State's previous freaking 3 home games, I do think that they have to force Chicago State to play that kind of tempo, because Chicago State's been very comfortable and good for backers playing under basketball. And this is one of those contrastive styles. So I could very easily go 1-1 when it comes to the spread and total, and that makes the team total even more important to go that 2-1 and make a profit. But seeing the number go from 136 down to 134.5 definitely has me pausing before I hit the full game total. The team total 71.5, it's going to happen. I'd rather do that than take them as a 7.5 point favorite. So see where I'm going from there. The last time that a game was lined at this number was against Bethune-Cookman at Bethune-Cookman, and the game went over by 24 points. So there's some more fucking interest to fucking put into your head about this game. But Chicago State, if I were to say what I like most when it comes to this first half total, it would definitely be the fact that free throw shooting is not going to freaking come into factor. I can get behind a 63.5, even though I'm not going to bet it because I project actually 68 points in this first half. That's the only way that I can play the under right now, because both these teams are good free throw shooting teams. Both of them elevate their scoring in the second half, and both defenses fucking give up close to 40 points in the second half. In this situation with Chicago State on the road and Illinois State at home. So to me, I look at some of the fucking stats and then I look at what I've watched with the Chicago State team, and they don't give up. You may be up on them at halftime, but they're not going to fucking just give up and lay down and take it. They're going to try and fuck you. So be aware of that. The Canadian for Illinois State is questionable with an ankle injury, McChesney. I always butcher his name, but he's one of my people, so I got to shout him out. And outside of that, my one area that I would say be cautious about is just that full game under, even though the numbers moved in their favor. These are two good free throw shooting teams, and if you anticipate, like I anticipate, a close game, I just see free throws coming into play, and both these teams are not going to leave points at the free throw line very often. All right, so a mixed bag there. Like the over, not there yet. Like the dog at 7.5, and like the favorite at their low team total, considering that they've scored 77 or more the last 3 home games. All right, let's move on to one of my other favorite games. So outside of the Denver game, this was probably my other favorite game, and that is the St. Thomas Tommies versus North Dakota. Yes, the Tommies at home are like a fucking multiple personality person compared to how they play on the road. With the Tommies, this is definitely a spot that I'm on first half, full game, and looking at their team total. Now, the Tommies are an interesting bunch because obviously they have a dynamite 3-point shooter and a guy like Riley Miller, but what they've really needed is that bulk and that skill up front. And getting freaking Patrick Bjorklund back is huge. I think that's where they can really do some freaking damage. Outside of that, this is a team that showed us a nice side of them against Green Bay, but let's dial it back. Wisconsin, Green Bay versus North Dakota are two different animals. North Dakota has been a team that has been able to score the basketball consistently. Wisconsin, Green Bay is not one of those teams. But when I look at this St. Thomas team, especially when they play at home, this is a spot where I think that they can score 80 points. So it's just how some programs just feel way more confident in their own gyms. than out on the road. And I think that this version of the Tommies is one of them. 75 or 76 points as a team total would be the number I ideally look at. I wouldn't take anything over 77, but I think that when you have a team total, you want to have 3 points of value based off your projection. And the Tommies have given me definitely a warm feeling that they can freaking score 80 points against a lot of opponents, especially when they're at home. So the Tommies right now, the team total, the first half, the full game spread, I think it's a triple-headed monster that comes through. Obviously, when you look at a guy like Riley Miller, it's about who else can help him offensively. And that's where I look at Andre Rode. This is a guy that has, 7 games in a row with double digits point-wise. He's played well in losses. He's played well in wins. And he's also played well in some relatively freaking ugly games, I would say. Listen, he's a good free throw shooter. The one area of concern that you're going to have is with the turnovers, but sometimes he can balance that out with the steals that he creates on the defensive end. Outside of that, you really need Bjorklund. You need Will Engels to produce for you from the three-point line. And if this team gets hot from 3 early, they're hard to freaking put out. So Bjorklund being back is huge. There's a bunch of good free throw shooters on this team. You're not going to be able to foul or isolate anybody, but the way that you can beat the Tommies is by beating them on the glass. If you can beat them on the glass, then you have a chance. That's their one area of weakness that I've watched and see them freaking fold all the time. But North Dakota, they've had a tough stretch. I can't remember the last time they won a game. I think it was a home game against Fullerton. They haven't been able to really replicate any of that success on the road. And frankly, I only like backing them when they're at home and when they're an underdog. This is not the case. I think that the Tommies roll on them. I think that North Dakota's free throw shooting comes back to haunt them. And even though you have quality freaking skill from an experienced guy like Matt Norman, I worry about everybody else. So Mitchell Suker did not take the step forward. Brady Danielson has not been what you needed. Caleb Nero isn't playing heavy minutes. So there's just a ton of mixing and matching going on for North Dakota. And I just don't think in this game tonight it's going to play out to their benefit. If you don't foul Matt Norman, you're probably going to get 50-50 free throw shooting out of them, and that could be enough points to comfortably cover this full game spread. 8 points, good by me. When we're talking about the first half at 4, that works for me also. And I think that the team total is 76.5 that I'm looking at on Pinnacle right now. That's a bettable number also. So I'm really liking it. All right, let's have a look. We're almost done. Obviously, I'm talking forever, but I don't give a shit because I make the rules. All right, Utah State and Weber State. Now, obviously, this is a big number, but I think that when you look at Utah State, you got to remember tonight they're getting Rylan Jones back. They're getting Taylor Funk back, and that pretty much puts them at their full strength. Weber State obviously looked fantastic against Cal Poly. Let's not freaking crown them the champions of Utah yet. This is an in-state game. This is a very physical, skilled front court that even though you didn't have Taylor Funk in the lineup, you got Max Shaluga back last game. You got Stephen Ashworth back in. Now you're getting Rylan Jones. Now you're getting Taylor Funk. And you still have to work in guys like Trevin Dorius, Daniel Atkins, Sean Barristow. Ryan Odom has a plethora of front court skilled scoring. And I just don't see how this Weber State team, even getting a good game from Steven Verplanken and Dylan Jones, is going to be able to compete. I think that Utah State beats them with transition scoring, slashing and getting to the free throw line. And I just don't really see the value in backing them. I think that when we've looked back at this matchup throughout the years, Utah State has really dominated. It's just they haven't dominated at some of these big numbers. They've covered one number, I think 2 or 3 years ago, that was at this spread, and it was a pretty abysmal performance, but it was a dominant performance on the defensive glass and limiting Weber State's possessions. So for me, I think that the team total with Utah State has to be something that's on your radar. This is a team that has been able to consistently score 80 points, and now getting healthy with all their guys in an in-state game just seems like a good situational spot. Now, at home, I think that they've scored into the 80s four out of 6 times. So for me, 79.5 points with a team that regularly goes over the number by 8.5 or more points, I'm good with that. And just to put a little more freaking jazz onto that team total, when you look at the game against Utah Tech, Oral Roberts, Santa Clara, Bradley, those games went over. Not the Bradley game, excuse me, but the Santa Clara, Oral Roberts, Utah Tech game went over by 20 plus points. So additional total value on this number at 143. Yes, Weber State wants to play under basketball. We all know that, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to. So I want to wait on Weber. I want to wait on Utah State to see if the number goes down lower. But if it starts getting freaking hit and steamed up, I'm going to jump on the full game spread. And then when it comes to the additional total, I'm looking at that 147. I'm looking at that 150 mark to get that plus money action on. I think that with Utah State, the 79.5 on their team total is a great number also. So that would probably be my favorite selection out of all of them. So I like the additional totals for sure. I like Utah State not as much on the spread, but I like Utah State 79.5 team total. So even in a game that doesn't go over, the probability of them scoring 80 points is just, I don't know, it's too high for me to ignore and not to get on. So rolling with that. All right, let's see what else we have. UT Arlington and San Fran, I'm not going to talk about because I don't really have a strong opinion on the game. I don't really have a strong edge aside from liking the first half over. I think that in games that San Francisco has played what I would call cupcakes and been lined in the double-digit range, I do think that there is an expectation that they come out and score some points and really take it to their lower-tier opponent instead of playing to their level. But from 14.5 points, I don't know. I have to wait till later in the night to see how I'm doing before I start to bet on that game. Northridge and Idaho. Now, I don't know what's going on with this line. It's gone from 3 to 5 now, and I just don't get it. I watch a lot of Idaho basketball. I like the Big Sky, and also it's not on at fucking 11 o'clock at night, so that works for me too. But I just don't see the advantage in taking CSUN when they're not an underdog. They've been good as a dog for me, at least this year. They haven't been good as a favorite. They haven't been good in a line that's under freaking 5 points. So for them, I don't even know if they've been a favorite this year. I think that the 4 times that they've been lined under 5.5, they were all dogs and they lost all of them. So I'd have to double check, but that's what I can remember off the top of my head. What obviously attracts me most to any game involving CSUN would be an under. We've seen a lot of their games lined lower than this that stay under, but it's really going to be about what the pace and tempo you get out of Idaho. Now, I think that this is their first. I think that this is CSUN's second game at home versus a D1 opponent. I think Northern Colorado was their first one. So that doesn't really give me a whole lot to go on and how they're freaking playing at home. But it's an Idaho spot to me. It's an Idaho number, especially the higher it gets. I think Idaho can win this game outright. I'll just say that. It feels like a diamond. It feels like a 10 o'clock diamond. First off, Devontae Moffitt. If you don't know who this kid is, Watch some Idaho basketball. Watch how smart the kid is when he needs to get his team a bucket, when his team is behind. He changes how he scores and how he operates the offense. I really like that. And he's a 90% free throw shooter. So right there, it's like that's the closer you need. That's the guy that you need to fucking help you backdoor cover a game, especially when it's more than one 3-point bucket. Idaho is a good free throw shooting team in general. It's definitely a team that I trust at the free throw line. The question's going to be, can they play like they played against Pacific, or are they going to play like they played against Cal Poly? Northridge is going to play with a lot of back to the basket offense, and they want to slow the game down where Idaho wants to play at a faster tempo. Whoever wins tempo is going to win the basketball game. At the number, I like obviously Idaho on the spread, and I'm starting to like them more and more on the money line. But I'm just concerned about two things. I'm concerned about if Northridge plays an up-tempo game, are they going to get the same kind of production from Aiden Wright? Who else? From fucking Bostic also. They both had fucking big games last time out, which makes me think that do guys at their level, are they really able to replicate their good scoring games from a game-to-game basis without taking a ton of shots? I don't think so. So right there, that plays into Idaho's hand also. When you look at some of the complimentary guys that Idaho has, like freaking Soleil or Isaac Jones, those guys are also going to be pretty critical to the fucking success of your team. Moffitt can't do it himself, but there's definitely enough skill with like Trey Smith also to come in and take care of business. I think that this is a game that just isn't lined correctly. So I'm going to roll with Idaho +5. I'm going to get on the money line. And I'm undecided on the total because if I like Idaho, then in theory I should be on the correlated play, which is the 135.5 over. But something about Northridge coming off a bad loss in a game that got into the 150s is stopping me. So I'll decide on that later. It's a 10 o'clock game, but from that breakdown, you should take that. I like Idaho. Hopefully they don't let me down. All right, well, that is about it. I've talked about all the games that I'm interested in talking about. And we got a basketball game starting in 30 fucking minutes. So let's go Southern Indiana, show IUPUI on a neutral court who fucks with their eyes open, eat your cupcakes, and never say anything to someone who's ordering a Hawaiian slice of pizza because you may get punched in the dick. Thank you for spending this hour and a half with me, and I'll talk to you guys later.